Okay, so YouTube video start, content start. Professor Mullahu is live right now, and I'm gonna take the next however long it takes to explain Hearthstone classes, which are the starting point of the entire game. But we're gonna explain the Hearthstone classes from the perspective of a new player who's coming to Hearthstone who has the brain capable to like conceptualize what these classes do, but just kind of needs someone to explain to them the differences between all of the classes from like an extreme new player, like have never touched Hearthstone before perspective. And each class does philosophically, designally move in one direction or another on a spectrum of archetypes. And we're going to talk about what I mean by archetypes, and then we're going to talk about kind of what I mean by the actual deck below it, because there's a hierarchy within Hearthstone that comes up, again, that was designed to be this way, but these kind of specifications and nuances are extremely unintuitive, require either someone telling you or educating you about it, or just tons of hours to kind of grind it and figure out the nuances between these different classes. And so my goal and hope right now, as I was kind of going through this whole lecture with someone that I know who is new to Hearthstone and found this really useful, I basically want to do this kind of for everybody. And eventually I'll probably cut it up into a YouTube video or a couple of YouTube videos because it took a while to go through them all. And I'm going to have to change it and tweak it a little bit because I had been talking with her already about a lot of Hearthstone things. And so I'm sure that I'm going to say a lot of stuff here that maybe won't have a foundation given to you by me yet, but hopefully you will either find that foundation while you're playing, or you will have or you just honestly won't even really need a foundation. Like, one of the good parts about hopefully this little lecture series here that I might be calling like big brain new game is we're just going to be talking like, what are these classes, like what do they do, but why should you choose one over the other, and what should you expect when playing against it from the other side? Because again, what a new player comes into this game and they're automatically introduced to 10 classes that all have a different hero power, different colors, different cards, and that is just so much information. And on top of that, one of the problems is that the new player experience forces you to grind from like level 40 within the new player ranks down to level 1. I was talking about this earlier and I like tweeted about it, but it doesn't matter obviously, but like it blows my mind that Hearthstone expects new players to play through the equivalent of 120 wins. You have to win 120 games to get out of the new player ranks. It's literally like an entire video game in itself just to get out of like Tutorial Island. And getting out of that Tutorial Island involves so much work and so many kind of hurdles that don't apply to the actual game itself, or teach you almost wrong things about what to expect from classes and what to expect from the different cards that you're going to be playing against, because that Tutorial Island is just full of like garbage old cards from like 6-7 years ago, and they don't teach you what the classes do. You can go into the crafting page in your collection, and I would suggest that every kind of new player does this if you're the person who likes to memorize things and like wants to actually just look at the encyclopedia of every card that you'll need to know. You can hit the crafting button and it will show you every card that is legal in standard or legal in like the main way that people play Hearthstone. And so it will include cards that you don't have. It will have, we're going to talk so much about Shaman Yeti because it's a crucial card to be talking about, which is funny you mention that. But it just shows you every single card that you might ever see. And it was kind of unintuitive, again, to the player that I was showing Hearthstone to come and find this, because they like didn't know where it was. They were looking online, and that was helpful, but it's in the game, and so you can just look here. But anyways, what are these classes? What is a class? And what is the difference between them, and how should we kind of be thinking about them? And I'm just going to go basically down every single class and talk about its hero power. And that's going to be one of the biggest cruxes of what we're going to talk about, is like, why does the hero power dictate what the class does. Because without looking at any of their cards, the only thing that is a difference between the classes is that they have a different hero power. What does that hero power do? What should you be thinking when you see that hero power? And then philosophically, what does it mean for that hero power to nudge that class in one direction or another when it comes to the archetype that they play? So a quick little glossary of terms before we get into it. We are recording this. The VOD is this, which is great, and that's why streaming is so awesome. There's a hierarchy of these terms in Hearthstone that at the top it starts with class, and then below that is your archetype, and then below that is your deck. And so the classes are Demon Hunter, Mage, Warlock, Rogue, Hunter, Priest, Warrior, Shaman, Paladin, Druid. Just each of the different types of guy that you can play in Hearthstone. Guy or girl or mans or they, them, etc. The archetype is on a spectrum of aggro or control. And we're going to revisit this in a little bit. But when you think of the classes in Hearthstone, the game was more or less designed to always have an aggro side of the spectrum and a control side of the spectrum of how you're going to play the game. The aggro decks, if you're familiar with any other type of game, like aggro is short for aggressive, they are going to be trying to kill the other guy as quickly as possible. It is the full court press. It is putting all of your bullets into one place. It is shooting as many bullets as you can. It's trying to kill the bad guy before the bad guy can kill you. On the other side of the spectrum is control, where your purpose is not to kill the bad guy, but to stifle them and to control them and stop them from doing what they want to do until at the point when you then take over the game and win by essentially like choking them out. This is what I mean when I say archetypes. And every class is then divided into a way to play that class in the aggressive way and the way to play that class in the control way. Their hero powers then dictate, is this class more of an aggro class or more of a control class? And since the hero power is the primary difference between each of the classes, we're basically going to start there and talk about why that changes what the class is and what the class does. And again, without even knowing a single card in Hearthstone, you can start to conceptualize the classes differently in terms of what their role in an average game is. Because you have a hero power every game, no matter what, as long as you play that class. And so when you have an access to a tool at all times, you should try to be making the best use out of that tool. If you have a hammer every single day, you will be able to do things that require a hammer better than someone who doesn't have a hammer every day. Or if someone has a gun every day, they can't do the hammer stuff very well, and the hammer guy can't do the gun stuff very well. And so because of that, they develop into these niches, and those niches then determine kind of how they want to play the game and effectively live their life every day. So, weirdly, we're going to be starting with Demon Hunter, because Demon Hunter is the newest class and one of the most bizarre classes, but another helpful thing, I think, for the new player in like 2020 that is maybe starting around when Dark Moon Fair is happening, and Demon Hunter is a legal class for you to be playing. I'm going to be telling you to basically be playing Demon Hunter. And we'll talk about why a little bit. But first, again, let's just start. So Demon Hunter is the newest class. It was released in March or so. It's the only new class that's been added to Hearthstone, but it was added in 2020. A brief aside, if you pay attention to other video games, other things like League of Legends or Magic or even like Melee, or not really Melee, but things like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and other games like that, where they are producing new characters to be playing every year. They have to be making new cards, they have to be making new characters. There's a concept called power creep that is essentially defined as, over time, new content is going to get better in a system because you've already designed all the basic stuff. Once you've designed the really simple things, when the pressure is on to make new stuff, you have to get fancier and bigger and spicier and more powerful, because that's the design space that's left. You've already introduced all of the kind of normal stuff, and so you have to get cooler, you have to get funkier. It's attractive to new players, it keeps things fresh, but the problem is it tends to push the envelope a little bit, and Demon Hunter is that pushed envelope. Since it's the only class that's been added in the last 7 years, the power creep was suddenly very obvious, and Demon Hunter is an extremely powerful class, and arguably the most powerful class from a base card set perspective. When you look at the original Mage cards and the original Hunter cards or the original Warrior cards, they're not very good because they were designed so long ago. They didn't need to be very good. They didn't know what good was, and over time, again, power creep is going to tell us that the cards are going to get better. So Demon Hunter is the new the new class, and it's one of the best ways to get out of Tutorial Island because it's so pushed and it's so different than all the other classes. But again, we'll kind of talk more about that and how this relates to all the other classes later. But we're going to most importantly talk about the hero power for every single class. So Demon Hunter's hero power, all the hero power is going to pop up like right here if you're looking at the video when I hover over this guy. The Demon Hunter hero power is 1 mana, give your hero 1 attack. The first thing you want to basically think is, okay, on that spectrum of aggro and control, is the Demon Hunter going to be more aggressive or more controlling? Attacking, giving your hero attack, tends to be an aggressive strategy. It's cheap, it's only 1 mana. Most hero powers cost 2 mana, and you've probably seen that by now if you've been playing at all. But the Demon Hunter hero power costs 1 mana, so it's cheap, it's efficient, and it lets you start attacking. Because of that, Demon Hunter is going to be an aggressively slanted class. The problem is, to tie it back into that story that I was talking about before, where Demon Hunter came out recently and had this really high power creep component to it. When Demon Hunter was first released, it was the best aggressive deck by an enormous margin. It was too pushed, it was too powerful, and it just killed you too quickly. Hearthstone wants every class to kind of be flexible. They want to have you to be able to play a control version and an aggro version, or something in the middle. But Demon Hunter was so far over near the aggressive side of that scale that it kind of became a problem. So Hearthstone released some more cards that gave it the option to be a control deck. The problem was those cards were too good, and then Demon Hunter just said, okay, I'll take all your really good control cards and then still be an aggro deck that controls you and kills you at the same time. This type of hybrid strategy became and is currently on November 9th, as I'm recording this now, the kind of hybrid Demon Hunter is arguably the best deck, or one of the best decks in the format, and in the standard format where people are playing competitively and kind of care about winning. Some of the basic components of Demon Hunter are to punch your opponent in the face. They punch them in the face, and you just do that enough times, and your opponent will eventually die. So the deck kind of became this toolbox surrounding, make sure that I punch as hard as possible, and then everything else that I do just controls you. That hybrid strategy, again, was a little bit too powerful, and as a result, Demon Hunter is still a very, very powerful deck. And because of that, you can build it for a very cheap cost, because it's new, because the base cards are so good, because you don't have to actually spend much money to get it. And I would heavily suggest playing Demon Hunter. You have to go into to unlock Demon Hunter, and even this is kind of unintuitive. You have to go into the solo adventures, go to Ashes of Outland, and then finish the prologue. And once you finish the prologue, they'll give you Demon Hunter. And then... Go away, Illidan. Finish that little prologue story adventure mode, and you'll get Demon Hunter, and then you can start playing it. And it will be very good. And you can then kind of look up Demon Hunter decks to play that will help you out a lot. Just to quickly, I want to like talk about the hero power, which you did for Demon Hunter, and then I just want to highlight some of the kind of like basic cards that you'll see in Demon Hunter. Again, just like give you an idea of the strategy of what Demon Hunter is. Again, from someone that like knows chess or Magic and things like that, you kind of want to know what they're like. Okay, I know that Demon Hunter wants to be aggressive, but like how are they aggressive? Or like why are they aggressive? The way that Demon Hunter is aggressive, one of their primary mechanics is attacking. Like we saw that their hero power lets them attack for cheap. You might have seen already, if you've been playing, where some classes get weapons that let you attack. And Demon Hunter kind of gives you like a temporary weapon. So for one turn, you get to attack. But then they play cards like Battle Fiend, that when your hero attacks, it gets a bonus. It plays other cards like Shadowhoof Slayer, where again, it gives your attack even more attack. Twin Slice is a really important card that, again, cheap amount of mana gives you a lot of attack. This is the kind of identity of Demon Hunter. Cheap, aggressive, attacking, punching strategy. And it all basically stems from, again, it's kind of top-down design. And I was having an argument of whether or not like the differences between like top-down and bottom-up design when it comes to these hero powers. But I'm going to basically use the term top-down design because Demon Hunter is coming from World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft, they already have like concepts built into the character, but they are these broad, theoretical, flavorful concepts. And it all starts with that, and that trickles down into the hero power. The hero power for Demon Hunter is attacking. That attacking means that it falls under this aggressive side of the spectrum of things. And that is therefore what Demon Hunter is as a class. And again, would you be able to figure this out by just looking at Demon Hunter cards? Potentially. Would you be able to identify that like it is good or bad in Standard? No. Would you be able to even know which cards are good or bad? Again, no. And we're not even going to really talk about the specific cards because, again, you will learn those when you play against them. The best way to learn the cards is to either look at the crafting table and look at, like, just, if you're that type of player and that type of person that just goes and reads every single card, they want to study, they read the textbook from start to finish, cover to cover, go into the crafting, spend a couple days, and just read every card, and it will help you, and you might find that fun. And that's one of the cool parts about Hearthstone and card games in general, is like it gives you a ton of little cool individual things that you can look at. They have cool art, they have cool numbers, they have cool words, they have cool synergies, they have cool combos. That can be in itself a really fun part about Hearthstone. So if that's what you like, definitely suggest that you do that. But otherwise, you will learn these cards as you play against them. The cards that you need to learn just by virtue of playing Hearthstone, you will pick them up. So don't get overwhelmed by how many cards there are if that isn't fun to you, because they will come naturally over time. So don't really worry about that. It's far more important to understand what those big classes are, what those 10 ranging archetypes are. Or sorry, those 10 ranging classes with their unique archetypes of aggro or control in them, and kind of figuring out where they all fall on the spectrum. So we're going to go back to this other little page that we'd started before. And on this spectrum, Demon Hunter falls under more or less the aggressive side of the scale. It's somewhere down here near aggro. It's not a very, I mean, unfortunately, it is a powerful control deck right now because it's like, it was just given too many good cards. But philosophically, fundamentally, Demon Hunter is down here near the aggressive strategies. So what's next? In this lineup, we're basically just going to kind of go down this little list right now. And I started with Demon Hunter because it's the newest class. But traditionally, the best class for new players is Mage. Its initial cards, its base set cards, are very good. Things like Frostbolt are efficient, they're flexible, they're spells, and so they're not creatures, so they get to do kind of whatever you want them to do. They don't have to wait a turn to attack. They don't have to be blocked by things with taunt. Spells can kind of do a lot of things, and Mage is the spell class. Coming from World of Warcraft or any other thing like D&D, you should kind of know that when you hear a Mage, it's very spell heavy, it's arcane, they're fragile, but they have these very high peaks, these very powerful ceilings, and that becomes the attractive element of playing Mage. So if you like spells and casting spells that do all kinds of stuff, Mage might be the class for you. So again, to start, what is the Mage hero power? The Mage hero power is 2 mana, deal 1 damage to anything. It is the kind of proto-flexible hero power. You don't have to attack, so you don't have to take any damage when you use it. You can point it at whatever you want, and it deals just 1 damage. Because of this, because of flexibility, flexibility tends to be a control type of mechanic or a control type of a function. 1 damage isn't very much. If your goal is to try to kill somebody or kill something in Hearthstone, 1 damage is going to be really slow. So it's not a very aggressive ability. Instead, because it's flexible and because it can help make your math better, it can help bring you from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 that end up killing creatures efficiently or kind of clearing the board for you. Mage is going to fall under a more control slanted side of the archetype spectrum. Demon Hunter, we saw that it was about it was cheaper, it was aggressive. You could hero power twice for Demon Hunter and get 2 damage for the same amount of mana. And because of that, they're going to be more aggressive. Mage, flexible, reactive. So it's going to be a little bit more control heavy. Its cards, like I said, are things like Frostbolt, where it just deals 3 damage to anything. You can kill a creature with it. You can shoot your opponent for 3. Sometimes it kills them. Sometimes it just freezes them so they can't attack, like against Demon Hunter. And they play other things like Secrets and things that freeze the board and lock things up. Again, the fundamentals of Mage are that you have Fire, Frost, and Arcane are the 3 types of spells. So Frost will lock things up. That's a very control-heavy mechanic. Fire will deal damage and kill things. And sometimes there are aggressive fire-based Mage decks, but a lot of the times you're going to be using your fire spells to kill lots of creatures, or kind of light a forest on fire and prevent your opponent from kind of doing what they want to do. Again, we're not going to really worry with many of the types of cards, but Mage can also do some tricky things, like Arcane is kind of the tricksy school of their magic. And again, tricksy tends to be control heavy. It means that you're going to go slower. It means that you're going to try to stop your opponent from doing what they want to do and eventually win the game. And because of that, and because of their flexible, low damage, but efficient hero power, they're going to be something more like a control deck. And so on that spectrum again, when you go back to this other page, we're going to put Mage closer to the control side of things. Certainly farther down the spectrum than Demon Hunter is. But they have, again, the option to go aggressive, but most of their cards are better as control cards. And this is, again, something that Hearthstone is doing for you. They give you 10 different classes to pick from. If they were all the same, there would be no point. So the way that they change them is this hero power nudges you in one direction or another. And each class basically gets nudged a different amount left down this spectrum or right down this spectrum towards aggro or control respectively. And that just kind of gives you a direction for what cards you can be playing, gives you a direction for how you should be trying to play the game. If you're a control deck, you know that you should be going slower and that you should be kind of slowing things down, stopping your opponent. If you're an aggressive deck, you want to go faster. You want to make sure that you don't run out of gas before it's too late. You want to make sure that you don't get controlled down. And so if you like playing one strategy or another, or sometimes one strategy is just better than another because of the cards that happen to be legal at that time, and that will then dictate which deck you play. And the deck is basically just like the skin of your archetype. The deck changes every month, every year, but fundamentally, the archetypes will always be aggro, control, or something in the middle. And picking that and deciding where you want to fall on that spectrum is part of the fun of Hearthstone. And so finding what you like to play that wins as much as you want it to win or you are comfortable with winning is the end game, is the ultimate purpose and goal of Hearthstone. Find a deck that you like, that wins enough, that makes you happy enough, and play Hearthstone. And explore and read these cards and learn things and figure out combinations and study and compete. And that is why card games are so awesome, because it's so many funky pieces working and spinning in one super system that is constantly evolving and fluctuating. A little water break, and then we're going to talk about Warlock, which is the next big one here. And the first class that I ever got over 1,000 wins with. So I played a lot of Warlock, and it really appealed to me as a new player. It was the first deck that I really ever played back in the day. So, Warlock now. Again, if you're familiar with Magic or Hearthstone or World of Warcraft or D&D, Mages and Warlocks are very similar. They're both squishy characters that rely heavily on magic. But the mage identity is one of, like, they're intrinsically powerful. They've been studying their whole life. They have these powerful magical abilities within themselves. Warlock, again, if you're familiar with the lore, is about getting your power from somewhere else or paying a cost to be powerful. They hook up with some sicko demon or extreme ancient evil overlord that kind of bestows them power in return for allegiance or blood or sacrifice. And so we see that the Warlock hero power is 2 mana, draw a card, and then take 2 damage. If you're familiar with Magic, you would see this and go, wow, this is broken. And you would kind of be right. The ability to draw an extra card in any card game is a fundamentally extremely powerful one. Because of this, the downside in Hearthstone is that you have to take damage, is that you start to die quicker in exchange for paying that mana to get that card. You can only do it once a turn, and if you do it every turn, great, you have tons of cards, but you're going to be really low, and you've used a lot of mana to actually get there. And so utilizing this hero power becomes very tricky, but it's extremely powerful. Again, those demons, those super demons, are giving you this temptation of power that, if you use it correctly, will yield great things for you. But if you misuse it, you can literally die betting on this lust for strength. And so, like every class, for the most part, they're going to have an aggressive or a control slanted version to them. We talked about Demon Hunter, which is more aggressively slanted. We talked about Mage, which is more control slanted. Warlock is actually a really good example, directly because of their hero power, that can do either or very well. For the aggressive deck, you can use the Warlock hero power to keep your pedal to the metal. You can keep your foot on the gas. Every turn you can just play cheap creatures and then draw another card and play 2 cheap creatures. And then every turn be playing 2 cards. That can sometimes run people over. And that is the slant of the aggressive Warlock deck. you can play these cheap 1-mana creatures with big, powerful stats, but you pay a cost for it. You have to lose life. You have to, again, with your hero power, you're losing life. Like, you're running on a razor's edge. You can suddenly die out of nowhere. But if you play it well, you can spin that aggressive deck into a victory. So the Warlock aggressive strategy, because of their hero power, is kind of a lot of cheap things because you can draw cards every turn. You can draw extra cards every turn. The problem with aggressive decks normally is they run out of gas. Warlock gets to beat that. And so if you like playing an aggressive deck, you might want to play Warlock and what's called Zoo, where it's a bunch of cheap, aggressive creatures that just get onto the battlefield and start attacking. And you try to keep that pressure up as much as you can. The other strategy, however, because Warlock gives you lots of cards, is to maybe play a control deck. Control decks love to have cards because it gives them options. It lets them say, okay, can I deal with this card and that card? Sometimes that's difficult when you only have so many cards in your hand. But if you use that Warlock hero power, you don't care about getting onto the board. You don't care about playing creatures. You just want to draw a card. You just want to draw 2 cards every single turn. That's a very kind of control-heavy minded strategy if you don't mind not being aggressive. Like, you can just sit and pile up a ton of cards, like amass these resources, and then use that to win the game. And so on the other end of the spectrum, you get things like this, that is a Warlock card, where it's just kill everything. It's just everything dies. Warlock has access to these kind of big, flashy, powerful effects. You have to pay a lot of mana for it. And so if you die before then it's not very good. But so you build your deck to survive, to control, and then reset the board. And if your opponent is trying to play an aggressive deck, by this point, they've run out of stuff, and then you start to take over the game as this Warlock. And so again, just because of their hero power, again, directly as a function of what they are designed to be, there are 2 different ways to play it. There are 2 different ways to take advantage of the inherent kind of special power that the Warlock hero power gives them. And that gets to direct how you play. And so again, from the philosophical perspective, Warlock is all about sacrifice for power. And sometimes you use that sacrifice to kill your opponent quickly, and sometimes you use that sacrifice to start doing extremely powerful things as soon as you can. And so because of this, Warlock is going to kind of fall in both ranges of aggressive or control. And we're going to do this where Warlock can be very aggressive, but they can also be very controlling. And so maybe we should kind of put it both in the middle like this. But they have 2 ways to kind of play, again, because of their hero power. Let's head back to Hearthstone. We've got now, next on the list, Rogue, which is, you'll see based on when we fill in Rogue on our chart next, Rogue falls in a really funky spot. Their hero power is 2 mana, equip a weapon. No other class can equip a weapon that hangs around for 2 turns. No other class gets a hero power that does something the next turn without paying any mana. Normally, every class needs to use their hero power every turn if they want to get a benefit from it. But Rogue, you can just pay mana once, and you get a 1/2 weapon. So a weapon that has 1 power and 2 charges, or 2 uses, or 2 durability out of it. Automatically, again, design-wise, let's just look at the numbers. Rogue can deal 2 damage for their 2 mana. They can attack you twice and get 2 damage in. This is the same amount of damage per mana as Demon Hunter, where they can pay 2 mana and attack twice for 1, which is very similar to Rogue. This is more damage than Mage, because Mage can only deal 1 damage for 2 mana, And it's a lot more damage than Warlock, because Warlock deals no damage to your opponent. They're more about gaining resources for themselves. But so what's the primary difference between Rogue here? It's time. You get to save time by spending your mana early and still getting an effect later. But you also have to spend more time you have to wait for 2 turns to attack twice to get that 2 damage. And so Rogue is, again, as a class, as an identity, is all about manipulating, in a weird way, the time or tempo of the match. Rogue is basically my favorite class now. It is kind of renowned as one of the like big brain classes because it's extremely combo heavy. Literally, its mechanic, its primary kind of name mechanic of the class is called combo. And what combo means is if you've played a card before a card with combo, your card with combo does something extra. You get rewarded for kind of spending extra resources in one turn. And so it has to be in the same turn, but you kind of get to go extra fast if you spend resources all in one turn. And that's that feeling of tempo. That's that go. You get to choose when you want to go really quick and choose when you want to go really slow. So your hero power is kind of slow, but combo suddenly does something explosive. And balancing this range of when to go fast and when to go slow is very difficult. It requires a general mastery of Hearthstone as a game. It requires a general mastery of your opponent's cards. It requires a general mastery of your own cards. So I would not recommend Rogue to the average new player. Once you get into the meat of the game, it might get a lot more attractive to you. But Rogue as a class is all about making these kind of tough, complicated decisions. And again, some people that's very attractive to them, and some people it's not. Some of its other hallmark cards are, again, more secrets, where it does something, your opponent can kind of fall into your trap, or giant creatures that when you play a lot of cards, they get humongous. Or one of the original cards from Rogue is Sap, where it's not a removal spell. It's not like that Warlock card where it just kills everything. This does, for a 2 mana, not much mana, you just temporarily deal with a problem. It's going to come back. And if it comes back, that might be really bad for you. And if you didn't leverage that advantage, that temporary, again, time-based advantage, then things are going to start to fall apart. The wheels are going to fall off of your car. So it's up to you to, again, use these temporary, like, time-altering tools of wasting your opponent's time for a little bit, or giving them a little bit of time and then punishing them. Waffling in and out of those ranges is the Rogue dance. And so we see cards like Sap, where it is a temporary solution, and if you don't capitalize on it, you might die. But if you do capitalize on it, you have these big rewards potentially there for the taking. So when we compare it back on this list of our scale, what is the archetype of Rogue? Where does it really fall? Is it an aggro deck or is it a control deck? Professor Mullihu, you just kind of told me that it's more about time, and it didn't really seem, it does 2 damage, but it kind of like takes a little while. It has to use its, when you attack things, you take damage, and that's not very good for a control deck. So where does it fall? I'll let you kind of guess, but it's essentially in the middle. Rogue is kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. Just like, again, the canonical rogue, bard, sneaky trickster character. It operates in that mid-ground. It operates in that time-sensitive space where it can suddenly be an aggro deck and suddenly be a control deck. But because of that, it wants to linger in this range where you don't even know, your opponent doesn't even know where is this rogue? Like, is he gonna be attacking us soon? Is he gonna suddenly explode onto the field? Is he suddenly going to kill everything that we did? Is he suddenly gonna return stop our entire play? You don't really know. And that deception, that shadow leaning effect is why Rogue kind of gets to hover in the middle of this scale between aggro and control. Hard deck to play, funky deck to play, and it cheats on mana too. It plays a lot of cheap 0 mana cards in some cases because that triggers your combos very well. But a very funky card, and again, we can see why and where the identity of this card falls into the range of these other classes that we have. So what's next on the list? We've got Hunter. Hunter, its hero power is 2 mana, deal 2 damage only to the enemy hero. Every single time it deals 2 damage and it ignores everything and goes straight to them. You just shoot an arrow directly into their face and it consistently, reliably deals 2 damage. Let's again think about where is this going to fall in that archetype range. Is that a control card or an aggro card? You would be hopefully correct to think that this would be an aggro card. Control doesn't care about killing your opponent over slowly or like chipping down your opponent over time or going to their face. Control decks want to interact with the board. They want to interact with your opponent. Aggro decks don't, in a perfect world, don't want to interact. They want to just kill you. Because of this, we find that Hunter, it's 2 mana, deal 2 damage, and it's always 2 mana, it's always 2 damage, and it's only in 1 turn. We now see, compared to the Rogue hero power, where it took 2 turns to deal 2 damage, or the Mage spell, the Mage hero power, where it takes 4 mana and 2 turns to deal 2 damage. Hunter is the most aggressively slanted deck in the game. Its design is to be an aggro deck. It plays beasts, it plays weapons that just get nasty and up there and in you and put the pressure on. Again, directly as a function of its hero power. Its similar types of cards are things like this, where it's a beast that makes all your other beasts attack even harder, punch even harder. It plays other traps that are, again, tricksy, but it's like a hunter out in the woods where when you're in their territory, you're gonna step in a trap and you're gonna be stuck and then they're gonna kill you, or they're gonna do something sneaky like putting you in their sights and getting rid of your big creature and then just keep pressing you, keep going. And then the big powerful cards that deal tons of damage, where we can do 3 mana, deals 5 damage. One of the most powerful just burn spells. It just kills you. It requires a beast, but they're meant to have beasts. They're kind of playing to the board and they're using their hero power to finish you off. Because of this, they have kind of a negative stigma against them, as we see a boo hiss in the chat, where most of the time, people that play card games want to have fun. They want to take their time and play their cool cards and do their cute things. And Hunter just says, I don't care about your feelings, you're dead. And because of that, people tend to be kind of a little nasty towards Hunter, or kind of there are stereotypes or memes or jokes about like Hunter players like are brain dead, or they don't have the pulsating cranium to play a harder class. But Hearthstone designed, they want the whole spectrum. If you're trying to get pulsating cranium fun times, your opponent, they're trying to win. Nothing says that they're not supposed to win. If just killing you is the best way to deal with that, that's your problem, man, not mine. And you are allowed to just play the kill you deck whenever you want. And sometimes it's very good. And the problem is aggro decks are very reliant on their cards being good and their cards lining up with the format well. So aggro decks tend to kind of dip in and out of popularity just simply based on the power level of the cards that they have access to. And right now, we're kind of in a weird spot, again, like in November, in the times before Dark Moon Fair comes out, where aggro is actually not very good. The control decks are very good. They're very good at incidentally gaining life. They're very good at kind of incidentally killing a lot of creatures, and it just makes being an aggro player a hard time right now. Because of this, I'm predicting that Darkmoon Faire is probably going to reinvigorate the aggro decks, and you'll see if you look at my spoiler sheet, if you ever come to the stream, and !spoilers will bring you to a Google Doc that I'm going to be working on stream, just analyzing and kind of speculating about these new cards that are coming out. There are some good new Hunter cards that might reinvigorate the aggressive Hunter deck. But right now, it's not a great deck, but that is its identity. That is its character. It is never going to really be a control deck, and it is always kind of going to try to press you and kill you. Because of that, and again, directly stemming from its hero power, Hunter is the premier aggro deck. Hunter is way down here and represents the literal number 1 on the aggressive scale of the aggro to control archetype spectrum. Close to the opposite end of the spectrum here is our next class, Priest. Priest's hero power is 2 mana, restore 2 health to anything. It can heal a creature, it can heal you, it can heal your opponent, it can heal your opponent's creatures. Those last 2 you don't do very often, but it's very good at stabilizing, at surviving. Again, because of this, the first thing we should be thinking about is, again, is this an aggro deck or a control deck? Is the hero power pushing us, incentivizing us to be control or aggro? We just saw Hunter, where it's a belligerent, deal 2 damage every time, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, kill you. Priest is on the opposite end, where it heals. It is a control slanting strategy. Gaining life in Hearthstone, and in every card game, tends to be seen as a very attractive thing to new players, because they realize I have 30 health. Well, as soon as I run out of health, I lose the game. So if I can just never lose my health, then I'll never lose, right? The problem and why Hearthstone is difficult is because sometimes your health can be misleading like that. You can be at 30 and be losing that game 100% of the time because the cards on board matter. The creatures matter. Resources matter. Your life is kind of a secondary resource that you're just allowed to play with. Because of this, Priest doesn't really use its life total as a resource. It just simply tries to boost up their life total as a resource to just survive, but other classes kind of use that resource in a better way. And so Priest is kind of taken a bad rap over the years in Hearthstone. Its hero power is, on a fundamental level, one of the weaker ones. As especially cards get better, as that power creep again starts to flow in and make the cards and tools that we're working with bigger and better and more powerful and more efficient, the Priest hero power kind of starts to lose equity. You don't really want to use 2 mana to just gain 2 life, because all that does is like maybe helps you survive a little bit. You just rather play a good card with your 2 mana instead of just gaining life. So Priest has been in a rough spot over the years. It's had some of these huge droughts of just being an unplayable deck. It just had no good cards, and other decks were just better. Recently, Priest has actually gotten a good kind of boost to its power. It's a relatively strong control deck off of the back of things like Holy Smite, where it's 1 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion with no downside. That's very efficient, a very good control card. It has these things like 1 mana, gain 3 life. So again, compare this to our hero power. Half as much mana, heals more, and it discovers a spell. And it gives you the choice of, okay, how do I now deal with these problems that are coming up to me? So it got some new powerful bangers that allows it to stabilize, survive, and then suddenly take over the game with these giant creatures or massive effects that kind of swing the tables. But unfortunately, something that you'll see in a game that has 10 different choices is that oftentimes as these choices start to only differ, as these hero powers only change slightly between each class, certain classes will have their spot in the limelight, and other classes will kind of fall back into the background. And you get this weird problem where some classes are just better at doing what Priest wants to do, and then Priest just doesn't get to see play. But right now, Priest is decent. Going forward, hopefully it gets good and better. In a perfect world, every class is good. But in the real world, that's not how it happens. It tends to only be 4 or 5 classes are good at a time. And Priest right now is okay, but it's not great. So, to go and place our Priest here on our spectrum of archetypes, because of its hero power and because of its cards and because of its strategy, because of what it wants to do, it is way down here on the control side of things. Slide Warlock down a little bit in here. But it's down here on that control spectrum, if not basically a 10. You would think that this is kind of directly... don't want that yet. You would think that this is kind of directly kind of antithetical to Hunter, because Hunter is deal 2 damage and Priest is gain 2 life. And they would seem on opposite sides of the spectrum. However, since Priest has that somewhat flexible version of, like, you can heal your minions, it's not on the full 10 out of 10 control side. What we do see for that is Warrior, which is our next class. The Warrior hero power is 2 mana, gain 2 armor. The cool thing about armor in Hearthstone is it lets you go above your starting life total. So you can be at 30 and gain 2 armor, and you will go to an effective 32. Priest can gain 2 life when they're at 30, and they will stay at 30. You can never go above a creature's toughness or above your starting life total as Priest. Warrior, however, can go... there you go, Chris. Can go above 30. Because of this, this is the actual opposite end of the spectrum as Hunter. Hunter, always, no matter what, you have no choice, it punches your opponent for 2. Warrior, no matter what, you have no choice, it gains 2 armor. It boosts your defense. However, the cool card, or the cool part about Warrior, is again, when you're coming from World of Warcraft or D&D or another fantasy style game, when you think about Warrior, the kind of things that should come to mind, their philosophy is basically like no magic at all. They are sword and they are shield. That is the Warrior philosophy. That is the Warrior identity. This hero power, Blizzard and Hearthstone basically decided to, okay, are we going to make their hero power sword, or are we going to make their hero power shield? Well, we've kind of seen that Hunter would be kind of what sword is, and Rogue already has sword, but it's just a dagger. So it made more sense for Warrior to be designed as a shield hero power. But this doesn't mean that they are always only a control deck. Warrior, as a philosophy, still has sword. And we see that one of their major mechanics are weapons. Like the Rogue deck, Warrior gets to play these weapons that are, again, they're flexible. You can punch your opponent with it. You can kill their creatures with it. You can protect your creatures by getting rid of problematic things on board. But Warrior kind of simultaneously tries to stab you with its sword and then put up its shield. Stab you with its sword, put up its shield, or lean towards one or the other. But like Warlock, we see that it can play both roles actually pretty well. However, the weird part is that if you try to be the aggressive deck, you kind of just forget about your hero power. You basically just don't care about your hero power when you're the aggressive Warrior deck. This leads to some weird scenarios and situations where if you're ever in a spot where you're ignoring your hero power, it tends to mean that your deck is very good because it's just raw cards are powerful enough that you don't want to waste mana on your hero power. And when your raw cards are that good and your hero power is being foregone, something might be afoot. Some card is like the best card in the game right now, or the best strategy in the game, or lines up, just beats everyone else. So those are spots where, again, from a design perspective and a gameplay perspective, you don't really want to be as Hearthstone, as Blizzard, but it happens. Sometimes they let it rock and it hangs around for a little while, and sometimes it doesn't. and they ban it or they nerf it. But right now, Warrior is one of the best decks in the game because it kind of gets to do the Demon Hunter thing where it gets to control and attack at the same time and a little bit too well. Things like weapons that kill a bunch of creatures but can also attack your opponent, or creatures that gain a lot of armor because you're attacking with creatures, or deal a bunch of damage and gain armor. So Warrior's in a cool spot where it's almost not directly decided by its hero power. It can still be aggressive, and it can still use its shield to kind of make up for the fact that it was losing life by attacking. And that synergy starts to come into play. But as a hero power, you would think that the deck is a control deck. But in gameplay, because of the philosophy of Warrior that hides, that is kind of a level deeper, it is also sword and shield. So when we go and put this now on our little scale here, one of the versions of Warrior is the peak control deck. Is the absolute 10 out of 10. Oh my goodness. Absolute 10 out of 10 control deck, even more than Priest, where all it does is it goes to 60 life. How do you win now? That is one of the ways to play Warrior. But there's also this aggressive version that uses weapons and that uses pissed off creatures that when they're hurt, they do more damage, and they kind of try to get in there and be aggressive. And it falls somewhere in the middle-ish range. It's less aggressive than Warlock tends to be. But we see that Warrior kind of falls under this category of relatively aggressive or the absolute pinnacle of control. You'll notice that things like Warlock have 2 different decks and Warrior have 2 different decks. That tends to mean when classes can do that, that tends to mean that they're a good kind of class to invest your cards in too. You will be given a lot of options over time to play these types of decks. And whereas Priest, if they're like aggressive Priest decks, almost never exist, or tend to be, you can play a better aggressive deck like Hunter instead. So Priest kind of tends to be a one-trick pony. Mage, kind of a one-trick pony. These types of things start mattering when you decide what deck you want to play and what is fun to you and what is powerful to you. So that's Warrior. And now we only have a couple classes left. And these are basically the weird classes that we have left. And we're going to start with maybe the weirdest one, which is Shaman. Shaman's hero power is 2 mana, summon a random totem. What the heck is a totem? Why is my hero power doing something not discrete, something not reliable? And is that a good thing or a bad thing to me? So what the totems are basically 4 different types of little creatures that can be spawned. Let's see, totems, let me pull up what those look like. The Shaman totems are as follows. Forget about this last guy down here. Forget about this guy. But the 4 totems are Healing Totem, Searing Totem, Stoneclaw Totem, Wrath of Air Totem. When you click your button, when you press your Shaman hero power, one of these randomly gets summoned. They do different things. They have a little bit of a range to them. This one has Taunt. This one can attack. This one heals your team. This one makes your spells good. They're, again, just simply by the vibe of their effects, Shaman is this kind of jack of all trades class again. We start to get some vibes like Hunter or like Rogue, where it seems like it might be able to do a lot. But they have this leaning on these cards being in play by having these like little, these totems, these relics, these kind of tangible things that have to stick in play. And when they stick in play, they do good things over time for you. In Hearthstone, needing something to survive for your game plan to work, to be executed, can sometimes be a tall order. Shaman is maybe historically the swingiest in terms of being absolutely broken or absolutely unplayable. And it's kind of almost represented by the randomness of their hero power. Like, philosophically, it almost is embodied there, where it's a random totem. You're randomly either really sick and you're happy, or you're randomly really sad and you're pissed. The Shaman cards work a lot with these totems. They make their totems give them more attack. They give them all health. They play creatures that are like totems. They play creatures, there are funky other types of totems. They're kind of all about playing these little like diverse, funky little guys that have some quirky effects. You'll notice that if you ever describe a deck as being funky little guys with quirky effects, probably not very strong, probably not very powerful. If that's the best way to describe your class, it might be on the weak side, because you have these demon hunters and these warriors that are just pounding you into the dirt, and they're going right over your quirky little 0/2s and your little literally wooden totems that are just sitting there, and your opponents are bringing axes to the table. Because of this, Shaman is again okay. It's a medium deck. Is its hero power, to look at the kind of, again, this archetype scale, are you going to think that this hero power is a control hero power or an aggro hero power? It doesn't do damage. It doesn't gain life. But it like puts things on the board. It doesn't really feel very aggressive at all, but it doesn't also really feel very control at all. It doesn't really feel very reliable in the way that you want your control deck to be slow, reliable, and consistent. And exactly so, Shaman falls in this middle ground. They fall in the range kind of near Rogue, where they're not a great aggressive deck, fundamentally, and they're not a great control deck, fundamentally. But they can sometimes do one or the other, and they can sometimes do a decent job at it. But they're entirely dependent on what are their spells. Like, what cards do they have that are legal? And if they have bad cards, you basically would rather go to an aggro deck, or you would rather go to a better control deck. There has to be a really good reason for you to play Shaman, or there has to be a really good reason for you to play Rogue. One of the good reasons for you to play Rogue is because it rewards skilled players. It rewards spicy plays and good evaluations of the metagame. But Shaman doesn't really have that like big brain element to it. You can't really reward yourself by playing well with Shaman, because they're more about randomness. One of the major elements in Hearthstone is randomness. That's why people hate it, people love it, but it is, at the end of the day, what makes Hearthstone Hearthstone. Because it's a digital format, because you don't have to, because you can allow a computer to randomly pick a number for you. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff, and Shaman can do some crazy random stuff. They have cards, literally one of their major cards allows you to just turn a minion into a brand new minion. That's a very Shaman effect. It's random. And if you can control that randomness, sometimes your deck is very good. And when you can't control that randomness, your deck is very bad. And so it is this swingy, very kind of luck-dependent class. And you don't want to lean on luck if you don't have to. There are cool cards in Shaman. They have these, if you like kind of that randomness and you like a mid-rangey deck that's not really control, not really aggro, and it has a lot of tools, you got cool spells, you're doing these funky things like Overload, where you kind of suddenly like overcharge your batteries and do something powerful but then you're punished the next turn. This might kind of be the deck for you. It has these totems that do random effects. It can buff a lot of their minions and make their creatures, like you make a lot of creatures and make them all better. Your hero power makes a minion. You can make that minion big. Now that minion can attack. Now your hero power is maybe pretty good. But compared to a lot of the other classes, Shaman's hero power is one of the weaker ones because you want your hero power to be consistent, because you want it to actually push you in a direction. You want it to make you an aggressive deck or a control deck. So you have a tool at all times that helps your game plan. Shaman's tool is finicky and requires a lot of work and assumes that it's going to survive. When your opponent can stop your hero power, things can get a little out of hand a little too quickly. So Shaman, one of the unfortunately medium classes in Hearthstone, again, just from a purely design perspective. And it will be given its time in the limelight. It will be given its powerful cards. It was the best deck in the format earlier this year, and now it's completely unplayable for the most part. That is the ebb and flow of Hearthstone. The worse classes, the classes like Priest and Shaman, just more frequently aren't as good because from their design, they just aren't as powerful as some of the other classes in the way that these classes try to line up with each other. So we just have two left now, Paladin and Druid. We had just talked about a hero power that makes minions, and it was the first one that we had seen. Paladin's hero power also makes minions, but with the critical detail of the fact that it is not random. Shaman was making a completely random choice between one of four things. You had a 25% chance to summon this totem. There are some caveats to that, but we're not going to worry about it. Paladin's hero power every single time reliably makes a 1/1. Let's think about archetypes here. Is that a control archetype or an aggro archetype slanting effect? Creatures are good for aggression, but a 2-mana 1/1 in Hearthstone is not good. In Magic, 2-mana 1/1s, random little tokens in Magic are very good because they can block and they can not be selected to die like they can in Hearthstone. So unfortunately, the Paladin hero power is actually not very good. Even though we take away the randomness of the Shaman hero power, just a random 1/1 kind of sucks. You would actually rather have it be a random card, a random totem that has a little bit of a higher ceiling, that has an effect that is sometimes really good. And you're okay with taking that coin flip. Something that's really important in Hearthstone is deciding when and how to take these proverbial coin flips of if it pays off, I'm ahead. If it doesn't pay off, maybe I fall behind. Strategically deciding when to coin flip and how to coin flip is one of the most important things to learn about Hearthstone, or to just try your hardest to never have to coin flip and just consistently every single time do the consistent thing, which is why things like Hunter are good. Their hero power is consistent. There's no randomness. It kills your opponent. You know that your opponent starts with 30 life every game. If you want to consistently kill them, you don't maybe want to take these coin flips. So Paladin is weirdly, its hero power is like a worse version of the Shaman hero power. Because of that, we expect something kind of weird to happen, and something weird kind of does happen. The Paladin hero power tends to be completely ignored. Because it's not good, it just, the average Paladin deck tends to literally like pretend that it doesn't have a hero power at all, which is not great. Like every other class, like you're giving up a free tool. Why would I ever want to give up this free tool? The only reason to ever do that is because when your cards, your specific Paladin cards, so every class has cards that are only for Paladin. Like we've seen with all the other classes, there are only Shaman cards, there are only Warlock cards, there are only weapons in Rogue and Hunter. Every class has specific cards. Whenever the Paladin specific cards are really good, Paladin becomes good. And there's a funky Paladin mechanic that we'll see here, what's essentially kind of called pure Paladin, or the pure mechanic, where if you're playing no neutral cards, you're only playing Paladin cards, you get these bangers, these cards that do powerful Paladin-specific things. And again, this is exactly in line, fundamentally, philosophically, with our hero power being skippable. We need to have a good reason to play Paladin, because our hero power sucks. Here's our good reason. Our good reason is, if you just promise to only play Paladin cards, your deck might actually be really good. This is basically a Paladin-specific mechanic. And it makes sense, because their hero power is basically a worse version of other people's hero powers. And so the Paladin kind of themes are about the fantastic Paladin is, it's like a warrior, but it has magic. And the magic that it has is like holy magic. It's religious magic. It is healing magic. It is protecting magic. And so it does things like buff its minions. Its hero power wants to make 1/1s. That, one of the directions for the Paladin deck is to buff creatures. Decided, again, because of its hero power that just makes a creature. If you make creatures, you want to make your creatures good. One of Paladin's things is make creatures good. Or it goes down the light of healing. It has some priest vibes to it. Paladin is kind of like this hybrid class where it's like a warrior and a priest and a shaman all in one. Because of that middle ground, sometimes it's not very good. Sometimes you just end up with a medium thing. But when those hybrids and synergies work together really well and pop off, sometimes Paladin, because it's now 3 classes in one, is really good. And because of this ebb and flow of the natural way of Hearthstone, sometimes it's powerful, sometimes it's not. It will take its turn off and on. But so that's what the Paladin cards are about, are kind of like divine shields, where it puts that bubble around them, where it stops damage the first time they take it that you might have seen already. Protecting you, protecting your creatures. These all tend to be control-y elements, mid-rangey elements. They're not really aggressive decks because, again, its hero power isn't very good for aggression. Buffing your creatures is aggressive, but shields and healing aren't very aggressive strategies from, again, a design perspective. And so because of this, we see that Paladin tends to fall... not a triangle. We see that Paladin tends to fall near the, oh my goodness, control / mid-rangey side of things. It's not as controlling as warrior. It's not as controlling as priest. It's more controlling than shaman, because shaman has some like aggressive draws that it can do. But it's kind of in the middle. But this middle spot, you'd almost rather be more in the middle, like rogue or shaman. And you'd rather be more on the control end, like warrior and priest. But because you're not, this is kind of a spooky zone to be in. And it kind of sucks. And Paladin is, again, another kind of bemoaned class for being not that great very often. However, right now it's actually really good. The Paladin-specific cards are actually really strong. And so this is one of those lucky times where Paladin is powerful. So if you like protection and kind of playing this slower game, but you're not a full control deck and you have lots of healing, you have lots of kind of stabilization, and you like making your creatures big, then maybe again you want to look towards Paladin as a class. Last and least, we have our Druid, who in our little conversation of these last 3 classes where their hero power kind of sucks, Druid, their hero power kind of sucks. It is 2 mana, get 1 attack, and 1 armor. It is the middle ground of... It's like combining warrior and demon hunter into one. Or previously, more like combining rogue and warrior together. So again, is this an aggressive archetype slanting effect or a control slanting archetype effect? 2 mana, deal 1 damage. Not great. Not as flexible as Mage, which does the same amount of damage. But it gains armor, which is better controlling than Mage. But it's not dealing 2 damage, and it's not gaining 2 armor. So it's going to be towards the middle ground again. But slightly more towards control. Like we saw, the rogue hero power is a little bit like it helps you just kill little cheap minions and stuff. But the weird part about Druid is that it doesn't really care about using its hero power at all. Because what Druid wants to do, it is the nature guy. It is the big forest, like soul of the earth, soul of the planet class. And so what it wants to do is get a ton of mana. You have cards that just give you cheap free mana for 1 turn. Sometimes a ton of mana for 1 turn. You have cards that give you permanent mana, where you just straight up skip a turn. Because in Hearthstone, everyone gets 1 mana every turn. Druid is one of the only classes that says, nah, screw that, I'm gaining 2 mana this turn. And they just turbo down to starting to cast these enormous, chunky idiots. Like 6 mana, 4/8s. Or 8 mana, 8/8s. What Druid wants to do is, like how Rogue wants to manipulate time and kind of temporarily screw you up and then get an advantage, Druid wants to kind of head down, get an advantage. Just get mana and start doing more powerful things faster than you. If you're familiar with other games, this is kind of referred to as a ramp deck. So in Magic, you have things like Tron, if you're familiar with Hearthstone, or if you're familiar with Modern and stuff like that, where you just kind of quickly get a mana advantage that lets you run over your opponent. Tying this to our hero power, we see that basically, like, our hero power is not philosophically in line with that goal at all. Druid tends to skip its hero power entirely. Because of that, like Paladin, Druid is only really good when its cards are individually extremely powerful at that moment. That the deck that you can make can afford to skip its hero power and still be really good. There was a brief period of time recently where that was the case. This card is messed up. This card, for 8 mana, you get 2 beasts that are 5 mana each. So you spend 8 mana and you get 10 worth of cards. And they can attack right away. So you get these crazy creatures that either draw you cards as soon as they attack or kill a bunch of things as soon as they attack. This Druid deck was toxic. It got to 8 mana way too quickly because of this card, where you get 2 mana crystals permanently. They never go away. You just go straight from 4 to 6. And then when you untap and you go to 7 mana. So you literally, on turn 4, you skip basically 2 entire turns from your opponent. That is powerful. This card is single-handedly the reason why Druid is good right now. Druid is a very linear deck. For the most part, it doesn't really have an aggressive deck. It transforms and shapeshifts into creatures and beasts. Like you turn into a kitty cat. Like, again, if you played World of Warcraft, you have your feral forms. But the feral mechanic isn't very supported in Hearthstone. And it's much more about this mana advantage. This heavy doing things for free when you have a lot of mana. Or just kind of drawing a bunch of cards to get to using your big mana effects. So because of that, we look again at our list for our last and final creature, or our archetype here. They're not very aggressive slanted, because again, whenever you skip your hero power, you tend to be a control deck. Warrior skips its hero power because it's a control hero power when it wants to be the aggressive deck. But so we see Druid, because it just wants to go big and because it wants to go late into the late game, we see that Druid is something like a control deck, this late game deck, where it's weird because it wants to go late, but it wants to do that pretty early on. So it manipulates time in that regard, and we find ourselves with Druid rounding out our class spectrum of archetypes, closer to a control deck, but a very linear, non-random, just get this very unique type of advantage that is purely a function of their class and what their class cards can do that no one else can do. That basically rounds out the classes in Hearthstone. That fundamentally explains what each class is doing, why it wants to do what it does, and it all stems from its hero power. It stems from Blizzard designing this game where the first difference is its hero power, and that nudges you in a direction, and that's where you should be starting when you are trying to decide what deck you might think is fun, when you're starting out playing Hearthstone. Maybe if you've been playing Hearthstone forever, even just having this understanding of what the philosophies are like, why they line up the way they do, and even just seeing that scale that I've been working on, and kind of where they line up with each other. You can go and highlight the certain decks that are good on that chart at any given point in any metagame, and if most of the decks are control decks, that says something about your metagame. If most of the decks are aggro decks, that says something about your metagame. And they slide around, and things are always kind of flexible and moving. And that's where your deck, where it goes class, archetype, deck. The decks change all the time. They take on new faces. They take on new cards. And Dark Moon Fair, that's coming out soon, is going to be that example of that. We're going to get so many new cards. And one of my expectations is that things are going to get shaken up. We're going to see new decks doing new things. New cards reinvigorating archetypes. Giving, maybe aggro priest becomes a thing. Maybe control hunter becomes a thing. We don't know. But that's why new sets are fun. That's why new cards are fun. Evaluating new cards is fun. And I suggest you kind of pick a deck, pick an archetype, pick a class, and kind of stick with it for a little while. Learn it, see if it's fun, see what you like. Pay attention to what your opponents are doing. Do you like what they're doing more? Does it look like it's more fun to be doing what they're doing? Just experiment. But I think this guide will be extremely useful for understanding what these classes do, why they do the things that they do, and gives the information to a new player that would otherwise have a really hard time establishing what these differences are. Because, like, if you just start playing Hearthstone, what's a hunter? What's a priest? What's a war? I don't know. They have a hero power. Is that good? Is that bad? What are their cards like? I don't know. We went through all of that. We talked about what they do. We talked about why they kind of want to be doing one thing or another. And now you can use this information to hopefully speed run your learning of Hearthstone, of card games, of strategy, of game design, and use that however you want to use it. So I'm going to call this sequence right now, and I'm going to literally call it, I think, Big Brain New Game. You can now swell your noggin with this information and zoom ahead of people that don't have this information, help you understand and interface with the game. And maybe I'll do this more for other things or update this later, etc. Who knows, make it fancier. I'm probably just going to toss this VOD up onto YouTube, essentially uncut, because we just YOLO'd it and straight live ran it the whole time. As long as everything is good and hopefully all the audio is fine. I'm going to cut it like this and toss it on there. So if you find this or like this or thought this was valuable, definitely let me know. Swing by the stream. Look at the spoilers for these new sets. We're going to be talking about the new spoilers on stream a lot. We're like 25 cards in. We have 25 more to go already. And it's not even, we still have 135 for the entire set. Forget about mini sets because those are coming soon. So thanks for hanging out. This was fun. I find it really valuable. I think new players find it really valuable. And we're going to return to our regularly scheduled programming now. So thanks a bunch. Swing by the stream at twitch.tv/Mullahu if you like more of this, if you think that I'm cool, if you like my voice, if you like looking at these things. And we're going to do a lot coming into the future and leveling up the Hearthstone content and the Hearthstone community, because this game is sick and an awesome vehicle for understanding games, theory, philosophy, and strategy. So thanks again, and have a good one.